Coming up on this week's edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Some leading beef industry voices share the unique ways they've diversified their businesses. Plus, we'll discuss alternative marketing strategies that could add value to the beef you produce and put more money in your pocket.
And now, NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Kevin Ochsner. It's no secret that the beef industry has its challenges, and cattle producers are always looking for ways to prepare their businesses to weather the next storm. One idea worth exploring is diversification, creating complementary revenue-generating enterprises that can help manage long-term risk. So how do we identify those opportunities on our own farms and ranches? That's the question we'll attempt to answer today with the help of some leading voices in the beef industry. Our first guest is Steve Wooten of Beatty Canyon Ranch in Southeastern Colorado. He and his family are also the 2020 Environmental Stewardship Award national winners. Steve, tell us a little bit about your business.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, Beatty Canyon Ranch is located in the southeastern part of the state, as you said. What's unique about it is it's really remote. We are 60 miles from the nearest town, and it's in the rugged canyon country, so there's nothing but pristine pastures to graze. We're in a semi-arid environment, so farming is not a possibility. Dryland farming just cannot be done in that part of the state with any level of success. So we're a cow-calf operation. Yeah. We also raise our own replacement heifers. We're a 3-generation family on the ranch, so it's important for us to be thinking ahead about these young members of our family. When they come up, what's going to be available to them?
Our next guest is Stephanie Mock. Stephanie is the sustainability manager at Kualoa Ranch in Hawaii, which was the 2013 Regional Environmental Stewardship Award winner. Stephanie, tell us a little bit about your ranch.
Thank you. So Kualoa Ranch is about 4,000 acres, and it's located on the windward coast of Oahu, Hawaii, which is about 45 minutes away from Honolulu. And really, we looked at agritourism in the 1980s to diversify our cow-calf operation at that time. We've now transitioned to grass-fed beef and grow about 60 different crops. We have a year-round growing season, so we have that opportunity in Hawaii. And really, nowadays, we welcome about 750,000 guests to the property each year in a variety of tours and experiences, which I'll share more about later.
And our third panelist is Rick Coombe of Thunder View Farms in New York. Rick and his family are the 2018 Environmental Stewardship National Award winners. Rick, tell us about your operation.
We're a little unique in that we sit within the New York City watershed, which is the water supply for 9.5 million New Yorkers. And what happens on our 2,000-acre cow-calf operation affects that drinking water on a daily basis. Everybody pays a lot of attention to how we behave within the watershed, but we've developed and worked with a very unique public-private partnership to help protect that water and agriculture as we continue to grow and diversify the business as future generations think of coming home.
Well, let's get into the discussion. I'm curious to just get started. What caused each of you to explore diversification opportunities, and tell us a little bit about the process you went through to identify those opportunities. Steve?
Our impetus for diversification started back when our children were graduating from high school. Yeah. I have 2 daughters. We knew that probably we'd be getting some son-in-laws in the future, we hoped. But we had to look at what's the business going to look like when they come home. And so we started enterprising the business instead of everything flowing in one complete package. And the economy of the business was such that we were the last generation that could probably make a living off the ranch just with the cattle. And so for us, the first step forward was looking at the resources we have that are non-consumptive. On 27,000 acres of Beatty Canyon Ranch, we have elk, deer, antelope, bighorn sheep, bear. So a hunting enterprise was really the first step that we could do. It didn't take a whole lot of financial input, but it yielded us back some income, which was the first step we needed there.
Excellent. And Stephanie, tell us a little bit about your process and what caused you to explore diversification.
So our ranch is run by the sixth generation currently, John Morgan, our president and CEO, and his father, Francis, in the 80s, kind of saw this opportunity with the Japanese tourism market. In the 70s, they started offering horseback tours, and I really think it was just a way to get the Paniolos to do something after lunch, keep them on the ranch and maybe not taking a nap in the field. And so, in the 1980s, especially in Hawaii, the Japanese tourism market was just booming, and people were really in search for adventure and opportunities. And some local characters in the tourism scene reached out to Kualoa and said, "You have this beautiful landscape, like, can we have a tour here?" And Francis, being ever the businessman, was like, "Let's try it. Let's try it." And from there, it's really grown to a large operation today. And all the tours really come from team meetings and our president's vision for the property and how to keep it open and undeveloped and share that love of the land with the public. And ultimately, it was a diversified income stream, using that funding from agritourism to fund our own conservation initiatives, our ranching, and our diversified farm as well. So instead of seeking grants that, might be based on political ties or, just not as much funding available, how can we get funding to keep doing the good work that we're doing?
That's quite a story. Rick, tell us a little bit about your thought perspective as you seek to diversify your operation.
Well, I think it's interesting that we had a situation where we're maxed on the cattle numbers on our land to be the environmental stewards that we want to be. And as we looked at that situation, we're a direct-to-consumer business. We carry our beef right through, and people love that story. And if we had scaled to a level that was higher, we wouldn't necessarily be able to tell that story. We wouldn't be living that story. And it's very important in our world to always make sure you do what you say you're going to do. So we started to look at other opportunities. My son is graduating from Cornell this year. My daughter will be back in a couple of years. They both want to return to the farm. So we came upon an opportunity to get into the small square hay business by picking up about 400 acres of bottom ground, and decided we'd start trying to make 30 to 40,000 small squares a year. And the weather creates a challenge. The beautiful thing about being in the East is there's tremendous value in that product. If you can produce it, you will have no trouble selling it. So we were able to leverage a lot of the equipment we had, but it's still a work in progress, but it's heading in the right direction.
So let's back up a step. How do we as producers just challenge ourselves to think outside the box and explore new options? What would you say, Stephanie?
Yeah, so I would say to that, my first recommendation for producers looking to explore is go explore. Literally get off your ranch, go to other operations that you look up to or you want to learn more about, or something that's so completely different than your operation. I've found that when looking at opportunities, if you're so focused on the ground and what you're doing in front of you, you don't have the energy and the time to look up for those opportunities that you might not even logically think about. I think something that we also all talked about was talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues, create those public-private partnerships, because you can't think of every idea that might work or might not work on your property. So be open to hearing what other people have to say, but then run it through the filter of your land best, what makes sense for your land and what makes sense for your skills and capacity at the time. Any
secrets you two use to cause yourself to think a little more creatively in this process?
Yeah, Kevin. And actually, we used our daughter in her marketing, senior marketing at Panhandle, Oklahoma. She decided that she was going to take an economic dive into what can be done with the junipers. Southeast Colorado has a major encroachment of juniper forest down there. Okay. It's reduced our carrying capacity by 50% in some pastures. And so she was looking at, could we wafer it? Could we make bedding out of it? And the tree is sufficiently safe for livestock bedding or OSB board. The problem is you can ship chips from Canada all the way to Southeast Colorado cheaper than we could put the plant in and deliver it 60 miles to Lahaina. And you can't compete with Weyerhaeuser and Georgia Pacific for OSB. So we do that in each one of the thought processes we have. We do an economic analysis, cost and return, and then can we compete in the market with what we're looking at doing.
Does it make sense? Yeah. Rick?
I would simply say generationally is a challenge often, right? And as a multi-generational operation, you have to respect where you've been and the people that got you there. But simultaneously, I think you do have to challenge and you have to push. And I've been incredibly blessed by having that previous generation being open to ideas. And without that open, they've realized their time has come to continue to work. They feed cattle every day, they take care of the animals, but they're more than happy to let us take the operation in a different direction or a further direction. I shouldn't say a different direction.
I want to zero in on this agritourism. You really prompted my attention on that, Stephanie. 750,000 guests at your ranch a year. Hard to imagine that, Steve, down in southeastern Colorado. But tell us a little bit about the agritourism business, first of all, Stephanie, and perhaps you two can add in your experiences as well.
Absolutely. So one benefit of agritourism is you are connecting with the public on a day-to-day basis, and they are able to connect with agriculture, which, you know, producers and people who manage property take for granted. Hopping up on a horse and riding the property, that is an extremely new experience for a lot of people. Sure. So agritourism really is a chance for you to look up and out into your community a little bit more and connect with them on their level, because there's no way the public can have 50 years of ranching experience and immediately know what to do on the property. I think one benefit of agritourism is, you know, we talked about the diversified income streams, but it really helps educate the public about agriculture. It creates an idea of what agriculture is, when especially there's so much media that demonizes agriculture in any form. It's a chance to connect with people on a personal level, and you're hopefully creating agriculture advocates in the future. It's a lot harder to demonize someone when you know them personally. So I think that's kind of one huge benefit of agritourism, besides, you know, obviously the economic benefits we've talked about.
And Steve, you all did some agritourism over time as well, did you not?
Yes, we have. That was one of the second earliest enterprise that we added. We still do, not to the scale, and we changed it from an original horseback, chuck wagon, camping, fire cooking enterprise to where we invested in a lodge where we could have beds and give more opportunities to it. And what we found is we can draw people out of Colorado Springs, Denver area, the major metropolitan areas in Colorado, and that gives us a chance to get them on the ground, touch and feel, and really get a picture. And that's our goal. Is we don't need to speak to the folks in our area, they get it. We want to be able to draw and talk to the people that come there and give them an experience in Southeast Colorado that they didn't expect to find in the farming and ranching community.
So for the person who's watching this show and is inspired by your stories and wants to diversify, what do you recommend? Rick?
You know, run the numbers. Think outside the box, but spend your time running the numbers. It's not as always as easy as you think it is, and make sure you put a lot of conservative nature in the business. You know, those 30,000 small squares didn't all grow last year. You know, actually they grew, they just couldn't be harvested because of the weather, so we had, you know, a massive amount of baleage, which doesn't have a market in the East, you know, and so I just think that business end of it, don't get away from that. I mean, don't let your excitement and everything not focus on the business, because you don't need to complicate your life if it's not going to enhance your life.
That's a great suggestion, Stephanie.
Running the numbers, absolutely. Looking at your own operation and the skill set that other people in your operation have. Steve made a great point about his daughter and her marketing mind, looking at opportunities for Juniper. There's so many different skill sets. Tap into your network for ideas. And then additionally, I would also say, like I said before, go explore other opportunities. Even if it's just going to Steve's ranch and checking out what his lodge looks like or how he does signage with guests. Ultimately, it's running the numbers, making sure you feel comfortable with it, even if it feels a little strange, because it is change, and then being not afraid to experiment, and if it fails, you can just adapt.
That's right. Just find one new way that it didn't work and explore new ones. Steve, what would you recommend?
In our business, we tend to be very independent, centrally focused individuals. We make decisions every day, major decisions to minor decisions every day. When you start to look at agritourism, I think one of the things your family needs to sit down and have a discussion about is, can we make that change to being a service-oriented enterprise? Yeah. can we shut down that side of the business, and when the guests come, they get our full attention. You know how hard it is when you're at a restaurant and all of a sudden the waitress is on the phone talking at home and you'd like to have your meal delivered. If they come to your place and they don't get your full attention and your appreciation, so the family has to decide, can we do that? Is that something that we are collectively, or one of us, like Stephanie said, is there one of us that really is an outside, outward going person? That person gets to take the lead in that enterprise and everybody else works for them. The other thing that's difficult, and I agree with both of them on the finances side, this may be the first time in your life that you've really needed to take a look at liability on the operation. That bringing guests on comes with a certain level of liability, and you need to take care of that aspect of the business and create your new enterprise in a standalone enterprise. You're trying to make money for the operation. Don't let the cattle operation subsidize this one. So make it pencil on both sides of the balance sheet.
And don't put your core operation at risk from a liability standpoint.
Right.
Great point. Great conversation. Still ahead on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, our panel will discuss some of the alternative marketing strategies they've explored over the years to help add more value to their cattle. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Cattle producers across the country work hard to care for their animals and their land. The USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service is there to help. Find out how you can work with NRCS to develop a conservation plan for your operation. Find possible funding resources for implementing conservation practices, or get free expert advice on ways to improve your farm or ranch. Visit the website nrcs.usda.gov today.
Cattlemen and women are dedicated to managing their land and cattle in a sustainable way. They want to leave a legacy for future generations. For more than 30 years, the Environmental Stewardship Award has worked to honor these caretakers of the land and to share their stories. To find out more and to learn how you can nominate a farm or ranch for the Environmental Stewardship Award, visit the website environmentalstewardship.org.
Welcome back to this special edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen, as we talk with a great group of beef industry leaders about ways to protect against risk and improve profitability. I want to talk a little bit about marketing and adding value. What are some of the things you've done to add value to the cattle you produce on your operation? Steve?
Kevin, we've added value in our operation by moving our steers that we sell in the fall off the cow, 205-day age steers. We market them as natural, no hormone treatment. They're agent source verified through IMI Global and the Red Angus Association Feeder Calf Certification Program, which we feel like is paying dividends. 2 years ago, we got data back on those calves and 90% of them graded Choice Plus. On the heifer side, we've always been a maternal operation. So we work real hard at developing replacement quality heifers. We grow them over the winter, and then in the spring, say March, April, that's when we'll sell heifers through Superior as value-added heifers.
Replacement heifers, outstanding. How about your ranch?
Yeah, so looking at marketing and adding value to our beef, we have a restaurant on site, and so we have our grass-fed beef burgers available right there in the restaurant. So even if people weren't thinking about beef first and foremost, they're definitely getting a taste of it. And we also offer our Kualoa grown market, which is a kind of a side local market where our other cuts can be bought by the locals or visitors alike. So it's really an opportunity to not only see it in a restaurant setting and see what it all can be, but also how you can take that home and incorporate it into your own recipes. And obviously using social media. If you tag us and include, we have our great customers do the marketing of our beef almost for us by word of mouth.
That's perfect. Rick, what has your family explored in terms of value-added marketing opportunities?
Well, we've been a direct-to-consumer business for several years, taking our beef directly by half and quarter, to families in the metropolitan area. And it's been fascinating to us that the simplest marketing tactic we've used is pay $25 per referral. If somebody buys a quarter or a half that was a friend or market, we send $25 back to the person that referred it. And it sounds silly and it sounds simple, but these people I have a person that, makes $100 a year that way, and it's a really nice scenario to have them be the ones that are marketing your quality beef. And at the end of the day, we are blessed in one sense that we have unlimited demand in a lot of ways for our product. So some people are skeptical to want to refer others because they're afraid they'd have to wait longer to get their next half. But it's been use your quality product and let your customers tell your story is what we've used.
Excellent. And go ahead.
Rick, have you had any trouble getting your beef processed?
We haven't. We work with a small processing facility. We're their largest customer. We're a very regular customer. We've structured our business so it's basically 5 animals every 3 weeks, year round. And there were some efficiencies in making sure that processing plant is 100 miles from our house. So we have to, people laugh because we have 150 head of cattle, but we have a 16-foot bumper pole that we pull behind a freezer pickup, which makes economic sense, right? You bring the 5 animals up and you bring 5 animals home. You make that adjustment. It's only 1 day a month effectively, so it's not like it's terrible, but it is a challenge. And even for our case, as their largest customer, it's very difficult for us to get one-off special opportunities to process.
Yeah, that's been a challenge across the industry, hasn't it, Steve? Is that one of the reasons you don't pursue that? Or
Actually, we did pursue it, Kevin, and then when we had the Holcomb incident and we got into the COVID and the shackle space got really limited, there was also an increased demand. A lot of individuals that hadn't been in that direct sales market jumped in it, whether they were trying to get beef to their own home or the consumer was out going, I'll just buy a hamburger.
Sure.
And so everything slowed down in Colorado, and so we just shut ours down for a while until this kind of works itself through and we can get back to a regular timing for delivery.
Let's talk more about that. What other challenges have you experienced in your direct marketing efforts?
Well, like Rick was saying, we're blessed with increasing demand and not being able to keep up with production as much as there is demand. There's a balance with marketing and advertising. You don't want to do too much if you don't have the supply, because now you're just creating potential angry customers. And Rick and I were talking about, generally in that case, you'd say, oh, we'll get you on the next run. Well, we don't know when that's going to be, or that's going to be 6 months from now, or that kind of thing. So I think it's really, and I think it's relying on the word of mouth is probably your best form of advertising and marketing right now, as we can't predict all the patterns that are happening. But I love that idea about referring a friend for $25. That's such a great opportunity.
And just to pick up on the question, sure, Kevin, as well, is, the important thing is we send it regardless, right? It's one of those, we used to say, when you bought your next half. We don't want to do that. We just want to get it to them. But changing to the challenges, we're jam-packed. And COVID, Steve, as you mentioned, drove us, we were booking out and probably booking out 8-9 months. And it was really, really scary. I had a tremendous number of new customers coming. I knew I had a Rolodex of very, very reliable customers that have been more than a decade. Yeah. And how did I reserve those slots for them, but not turn down the business that you had coming? And then it was very unfair, I felt, to tell a regular customer they'd have to wait 6 months now, instead of their normal time period. That fortunately has slowed down. And the last piece I'll say is there's very little room for error because of the processing plants. And we work to sell those 5 animals every 3 weeks. But if something doesn't work out right, we occasionally throw a retail one in there because we do a little bit of retail at the farm, and you can swap. But if you don't have one to swap, then all of a sudden you're pushing everybody down the road. It's very difficult to make it up because you can't just simply call up and say, could I have one more slot?
It's a lot more complicated than just keeping a couple of animals back and feeding them some grain, isn't it? And that's what I hear.
If you want to do it right, I think it is.
And speaking of challenges, every day NCBA works to help address these issues and protect the interest of cattle producers all across the country. Help support this work by becoming an NCBA member. Just call 1-866-233-3872, or you can go to the website ncba.org. Still ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we're digging into the topic of sustainability and examining what it means for you as a beef producer, both now and in the future. Stay with us.
These are the pennies it costs for Alticid IGR protection, making it one of the best values in the market designed specifically for fighting hornflies on pasture. As a supplement, Alticid IGR is part of what you're already doing, and as a feed-through, what your cattle are always doing. Take shelter from the swarm for just 2 to 3 cents per animal per day. That's just $4.50 per animal per season. For hornfly protection that has been performing for over 40 years with no known resistance. Alticid IGR.
Welcome back to this special edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen as we talk with a group of beef industry leaders about ways to improve the profitability of your farm or ranch. So I'd like to talk about sustainability, and as we discuss this topic, I'm curious, how have you seen this topic of sustainability evolve in terms of the conversation it gets around our industry? Steve?
Kevin, about 6-7 years ago when sustainability was becoming a buzzword,
Yes.
we weren't sure, is this a real factor or is this just one of those marketing gimmicks that retailers are using? But we've come to realize that the issue of sustainability is within the beef industry. It's here to stay. It's in our society.
Yes.
It goes from the producer at my end clear to the consumer. The concerns of everybody in between are a part of it. There is no attempt in it to try to take over anything on an operation. It's about society deciding what our goals and values are, and caring for the land, caring for the water, caring for the environment and animals is an essential part of being in the business today.
And Rick, have you seen the conversation intensify?
Yeah, I think we've continued to see the conversation change and evolve by seeing people want to know. They want to know how this product they enjoy is produced. It matters to them where their food comes from. And I think it's really interesting to me that farmers and ranchers have been stewards in producing sustainable operations forever. It's now the buzzword in the consumer land that we have to tell our story. And I think that's the challenge that we often face. I think Steve said earlier, we're generally private people. We don't like to go out and boast and tell our story, but it's something we as producers need to. Our industry is sustainable. In our particular case, we continue to tell the population center in New York City that low density land use of agriculture has been very good to their water. And that water is the cleanest unfiltered water supply in the world. And that's because of agriculture and forestry. Where it was developed east of the Hudson, that water supply has to be filtered.
And Stephanie, how about in Hawaii? What do you hear relative to the conversation around sustainability there?
That's a great question. So I'm the sustainability manager for Kualoa Ranch.
Okay.
And I'm their first sustainability manager. But the concept of sustainability is really just caring for the land. It's that triple bottom line: economic, social, and environmental. It's all these factors that go into our decision making. So when I started as sustainability manager, I came in thinking I need to change things. But really, it was putting a face and a name to this really long-held value and tradition of land stewardship and caring for the community. So it was really just almost a rebranding, if you will, of these really long-held family values of the land. In terms of Hawaii, development pressure is huge. You know, land values are higher than ever. Everyone wants a piece of paradise, if you will. And really, Hawaii has endangered species, so that conservation against ranching or any sort of agriculture is really strong. But what I've seen in recent years is the focus on local agriculture and ranching, and how working with your partners in the watershed, ultimately it's all about diversity in the watershed. So that sustainability, every single person has a different definition of sustainability. You're never going to hit that 100% mark that everyone agrees with, But if you're on that path of continuous improvement and communication too, I think people are much more willing to work together so you can work towards this idea of sustainability in whatever definition you may have.
That's great. Quick question for each of you. Give me an example of one conservation practice that you've implemented in your operation that our viewers may benefit from. Right?
Gravity-fed water, I mean, we're in the mountains, so that's helpful, but by putting all the water for the cattle underground into their individual pastures, it really strengthened our rotational grazing ability. And at the end of the day, the water was key, and we were fencing the cattle out of the streams. We were doing all the things that you should do. We didn't want cattle drinking out of ponds or other areas to help protect that water supply that will be in the city of New York in 24 hours. But we needed to open that up, and burying all those lines and getting continuous flow gravity is a beautiful thing. When it was 26 below in New York last week, all our waters were running out of their pasture, never staying in, and open with no electric.
Outstanding. Stephanie?
So in Hawaii, our soils are pretty depleted, just being a tropical ecosystem. It comes with the landscape. So we really try to focus on soil health. So obviously one practice we do is rotational grazing as part of our grass-fed beef operation, and also utilizing green waste and mulching for our fields. We work with partners and arborists who give us their green waste, and we're able to mulch it and build compost that we can apply to our fields. In Hawaii, we have a diversity of soil orders. We are the most diverse in terms of soil orders. So there's definitely a huge need for conservation practices to address all the different resource concerns with all the different soil types. Because as we know, your soil is definitely not the same.
Very different. Tropical paradise in southeastern Colorado.
It is.
What's one conservation practice you would identify?
Wow, Kevin, one. I'm gonna have to go with a combination there. Our grazing management plan,
Yes.
the implementation, and that was a 30-year process.
Okay.
Started when we graduated from college, and it's continuing to evolve. It's an involvement every day, every month, every year. So we keep working on that. Our conservation easement was a tool that we used for succession to make sure that the family business can continue going for family members that want to get there.
Yes.
And as we all talk about in the West, but it affects even Rick in the East, a drought management plan. Once we started implementing a drought management plan, I can't tell you how having that written down and discussed with the family, how that provides you a sense of comfort going through the year. You know what you're gonna do in June and August and October, and follow that plan along with your grazing management. So those have been probably the three main tools that have helped us with our conservation on Beatty Canyon.
So what do you say to the producer who says, yeah, those things add cost, but they really don't improve the profitability of my operation?
Well, certainly that wouldn't be the case in our end. I mean, stronger rotational grazing, increased weaning weights, unequivocally. So that increased value. The other part that I would say is it does help market your product and tell your story. And if you tell that story, you can capitalize on it economically, and people want to know how that product was raised.
Steve, do you agree?
Yes, I do. Over the years, as we've continued to work on our conservation, we've shortened our interval from birth to weaning, but at the same time, our weaning weights have gone up, and we attribute that to a longer growing season by our grazing management plan with higher quality vegetation available. At the same time, we've reduced our overhead costs because we don't feed as much purchased product to our cattle. The Lord made them perfect to live out there and graze and convert and rebreed every year. We just got to provide those minimal inputs that they need to sustain themselves.
Stephanie, can sustainability conservation practices also add to profitability?
Absolutely. I think I would agree with Rick. It helps you tell your story for the public and the consumer ultimately. And that's going to raise your value just in terms of marketing and branding alone and your reputation. For us, at Kualoa, people come for the tours. They come because we're the scene of Jurassic Park. But throughout the tour, we are talking about all our different conservation practices. So, in terms of not only raising the price of beef and sharing that story, in agritourism too, that's a chance for you to show land stewardship in action, conservation practices, and being able to connect people might understand mulching a little bit more than a drought management plan, but that doesn't mean you can't start to talk about these practices so that you're encouraging others to take care of the land around them, but also care for the ranchers and other stewards of the land who are taking care of it.
That's a great comment. Telling your story, thank you all for telling yours today. We appreciate that. Now, up next on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll take a closer look at the Environmental Stewardship Award program and the impact it's had on the long-term success of the beef industry. That story when we return. Stay with us.
They're here, they're hungry, and they can't be stopped with ivermectin alone. Add Safeguard when you deworm your cattle to take out resistant parasites like brown stomach worm, Cooperia, Nematodiarus, and others. With 2 dewormers from 2 different classes, you can kill more resistant worms in your cattle, so you don't leave potential on the table. Consult your veterinarian for the diagnosis and treatment of parasitism. Then bite back at safeguardworks.com.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, CEO of MyPillow. Retailers, shopping channels, and now even banks have tried to cancel myself and MyPillow. During these times, your support has meant everything to us. So my employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. We're selling the best products ever for the best prices ever. For example, we have my towels with proprietary technology, which makes them soft and absorbent. Towels that work, what a concept. They're made with USA cotton and come in a variety of awesome colors. My 6-piece towel set is regularly $109.99, now just $39.99 with your promo code. So go to mypillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to receive this exclusive offer. If you do it right now, I'm going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you and God bless.
Welcome back as we continue our discussion with a great group of beef industry leaders who are willing to explore new opportunities on their farms and ranches. Now, each one of you have won an Environmental Stewardship Award, and I'm curious, is environmental stewardship still a priority in your operation, Steve?
Oh, absolutely, Kevin. It was a priority handed down from my grandmother to my mom's family, to myself, and it's a priority for Joy and I to continue to hand it down to the next generation. Regardless of being a winner, that was such an incredible honor by our industry and by our fellow members in the industry to award us that. But it's a core value within us. It's within our faith, it's within our family.
And how does that maintain itself as a core value at Kualoa Ranch?
Absolutely. That was such a great answer, by the way. I don't know how to talk about that, but for Kualoa Ranch, since our founding in 1850, stewardship and sustainability, ultimately, if we want to use a buzzword, has been at the core of what Kualoa Ranch has believed in for the property, how to take care of the land and show the love of that land. And so this award, too, was such an honor. And kind of just almost a stamp of approval from the industry that we are taking stewardship to the next level and really care for it in our day-to-day operation.
Rick?
I'd simply say, it was what we did long before we even knew there was an Environmental Stewardship Award. And I think it'll be what we do long after. And I think to Steve's point, we put permanent conservation easements on a good share of our property as well. And that's in perpetuity. So I think that gives a sense as to how we think about it.
And as a follow-up, Rick, has winning the award given you an opportunity to share your story more with others?
I think we've become a focal point more in the community. We've become unique with our partners, the Watershed Ag Council and the New York City DEP. They reach out to us regularly. How often is it to have your partner and your quote-unquote regulator, the DEP, reach out to have you tell your story? That's great when they're an advocate for you. And that happened on Earth Day this year when CBS News was doing a story on the New York City DEP watershed, and they wanted to include Thunderview Farms as an important part of keeping their water clean.
That's outstanding. Stephanie?
I think our opportunity really lies in sharing our story with our consumers, or what we call our guests at the ranch. It really allows us to showcase stewardship and sustainability on the tour itself and how much we care about the land. And ultimately, as you drive through on a tour or you have a wedding there, it's impossible to escape just the majesty of the land and to see how it's been open and undeveloped and how we continue that for future generations, and also just to share with the public as well.
Has winning the national award given Beatty Canyon an opportunity to share more about your story?
Unbelievable opportunities, Kevin. We are able to host grazing management seminars. We brought in some of the leaders in ranching for profit, Dallas Mount and others. We brought up the folks from Holistic Resource International, and because of that, we've been able to be a part of our community and draw our community to us and share that. But it's also let us go places we've never been. We've been to Bowling Green, Kentucky. We're going to South Dakota. We're in Denver, talking to producers and consumers. And it's just been an incredible opportunity to get out and share. We had an opportunity to be in Bowling Green, and then a tornado came through.
Oh, no.
And then contacted the folks in Kentucky Cattlemen is, what can we do?
Yeah.
But it was because we met each other, we shared a day of teaching and learning together, and so we're a family now, we're a community.
Absolutely. What incredible stories, and you all are all such excellent spokespeople. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the Environmental Stewardship Award winners, see photos or videos, or even learn how to nominate someone for the award, just visit the website environmentalstewardship.org. Still ahead, we'll talk about how important it is to share your sustainability story. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
From the very beginning, Ritchie has been dedicated to one thing: helping people deliver fresh, constant water to their animals. Today's Ritchie waterers rely on a valve design that remains much the same as it was in 1921. It's a simple idea. Do it right, and the rest will take care of itself. We never set out to create a company that would be around for 100 years. We just wanted to create something great.
It can be tough to keep up with all the issues that impact the beef cattle business. That's why NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen is dedicated to bringing you valuable news, information, and education. The goal is to give you the knowledge you need to make the best decisions for your operation. So if you're looking for in-depth coverage of the beef industry and the issues that matter to you, don't miss Cattlemen to Cattlemen, debuting every week on RFD TV and on YouTube.
Welcome back as we continue our discussion about the challenges and opportunities we face in the beef industry. So I'd like to talk about communication. What are we doing to communicate the sustainability story both inside and outside our industry? Steve, you want to take a crack?
Thanks, Kevin. I am really proud of our beef industry. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association has embraced sustainability. They've set their own goals to be met by 2040, but they were also instrumental in standing up the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, who works in the full supply chain from producer to retailer. We don't have a lot of touch base with the consumer once it passes through the retailer's hands, but that group of dedicated individuals in the U.S. Roundtable have set the metrics and indicators, provided a toolbox for producers and members through the supply chain, and are about to finish their goal work to set their goals to work with NCBA goals. And that's a way that we tell our story, but we also finally put the sidebars on the definition of sustainability so that when somebody hears it from the beef industry, they know what it really truly means. It's got a dedicated meaning to it now.
And it's given us an opportunity to define sustainability ourselves as opposed to having it defined for us, right?
You are 100% right. The one thing we did not want to happen is have regulation handed down to us that didn't fit our industry. This way, we've set our own set of goals, we've set our own path, and we'll achieve those goals.
So it starts with communicating within that producer group. Where else do we need to communicate, Stephanie?
I think an important place to communicate is direct to consumers. How do you reach them where they're at so that you can share your story? One important thing to think about is social media. Everyone has a smartphone nowadays, and even though social media can be a plague or it can be something really well used in marketing, you yourself may not have social media savvy, but you know someone around you who can share your story. And that way people are just able to take out their phone and see it direct and just kind of scroll through and learn more about your property and what you're doing in your operation. I think another thing, at least at Kualoa, is looking at tourism, agritourism. So you're welcoming them onto your property and connecting with them face to face. There is no better connection than that, right? You know, I just talked about the phone, but a face-to-face connection, that is perfect marketing and just an opportunity to build connection as well.
Rick, what would you add in terms of communicating sustainability?
Well, we also have to use the one-to-many, which is media. And I think at the end of the day, if we let others tell our story, we let reporters write our story, or we let people write it without producers playing a role, we don't have the ability to influence that story. And the reality is, we have a great story to tell. I mean, we're talking about an environmental stewardship award that has been in place for 30 years, right? I mean, it's not like it was in place the last 5 years as everybody talks about this. So get out and take those opportunities. Again, it's difficult as a producer to take your time to invite that reporter or answer those questions and take that presence with a chef or with anybody that you have the opportunity. But if we don't tell our story, somebody else will, and we should be able to write it.
We do have a great story to tell, and each of you are wonderful at telling that story, so thank you for that. We'll be back to wrap up our show right after this. Stay with us.
Grass is the center of our universe. We've got to have a grass program that we can count on and plan on. That's what we need to sustain us, to keep us growing, to keep us prospering.
Join the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. NCBA is the oldest cattle industry organization, working every day to defend your interests in Washington, D.C. And there are big benefits to being a member. You'll get news you can use in the National Cattlemen and policy updates from Beltway Beef, plus big discounts from John Deere, Cabela's, and more great partners. Join now. Call 866-233-3872 or sign up online at ncba.org.
You have an upcoming production sale to advertise? Then contact the Cattlemen to Cattlemen marketing team or your breed association to learn more.
Welcome back. As we wrap up our program today, I'd like to give each of our guests a chance to share some final thoughts with us. Steve, what might you have to challenge our audience?
Kevin, I would advise you to seek out as many mentors as you can. I've been blessed with folks like Dr. Tim Steffens and Dallas Mount and David Pratt and Bert Tiekert. And some of the things that I've taken from them are successful people are cautious risk takers. They're risk takers. Yep. They embrace change. They see change as not a challenge, but as an opportunity. Yeah. And sometimes within our industry, we get rooted in, as Stephanie said, we're so busy looking at the ground, we forget to look up and see what's around us. Yes. And I like that philosophy of being a cautious risk taker, not being afraid to change, a leader in the community, and embrace that part of it. We talked about diversifying businesses, and don't be afraid if you have the opportunity to go into a different career that is your talents. You can still ranch, you can still love cattle, you can still produce beef, but if your passion is helping somewhere in the community, embrace it. It'll come to you in many, many ways, financial and other.
That's a great recommendation. Stephanie?
You know, we started this show talking about diversifying enterprises.
Yes.
And I think you need to look at you as the individual, as an enterprise, and how you diversify and enhance your individual self. And part of that is being open to learning. We're in all different stages of all different learning topics. You know, I've learned so much here today, and just watching Cattlemen to Cattlemen is already on that track to being open to learning about new voices and new possible mentors and that kind of thing. So I think my final thought is, you know, change is inevitable, but you can be prepared for that change by looking up and connecting and being open to learning. You know, learning doesn't stop when you leave high school or leave college. It's really a lifelong opportunity. And one thing I know about farmers and ranchers are they are incredibly dynamic people. You guys are always dealing with harsh weather patterns or droughts and all this kind of stuff. You're constantly learning, and it's just looking at different sectors of industry that you can take lessons from and apply it to your operation. So be open.
In the words of Zig Ziglar, he always said, when you're green, you're growing, and when you're ripe, you rot. And that's a great challenge for being lifelong learners. Rick?
I'd simply say we're temporary stewards of not only our land, but of our industry and of our families. And we need to make sure we develop all those things together. You know, at the end of the day, we have to leave this industry and our food supply in good hands. So let's make sure we look and we notice, we learn from our mistakes, but we're not afraid to reach out and find other opportunities. They're gonna come to us, some from our own families, some from other ideas, but make sure we look for them and look around the corner.
Years ago, one of our National Environmental Stewardship Award winners made the comment that we're not inheriting this land from our forefathers, we're borrowing it from our grandkids, and that attitude, I think, is an important perspective in all of our businesses. Thank you all for your time, for your insights, and most important, for the example you set for all of us in the industry to follow. We appreciate that. Now, if you thought our guests did a great job today, you should have heard the educational sessions they took part in at Cattlemen's College in Houston. They shared lots of great information on how to diversify a cattle business in order to help manage long-term risk. If you were unable to be with us in Houston, or if there was a class you missed that you'd really wanted to see, the good news is all these sessions were recorded and they're available for viewing online. Just visit ncba.org for all the details. Well, that wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thanks so much for spending time with us. We'll see you next week right here on RFD TV.